At the heart of so much of your work, at the heart of so much of our work, is this sense that local communities that work together is a sustainable model. At a time when corporate banking has imploded and is trying to take down many with them, our local banks stand up and have done wonderful things during that same period of time. When I think about the ways in which local human service agencies work so collaboratively, I know that they are doing so much more with so fewer dollars compared to the big urban environments where they get so much more and really do so much less. And so in here in this room is that energy. In here in this room is this sense, and I see some people who have been doing it for a long time, and I see some who are learning about it, like me. I'm just really learning and trying to appreciate and understand how local is a sustainable model on many different levels. And so I know that part of this conversation really is about food, but I think it has all kinds of other implications in the way that we as a community can sustain ourselves. I heard John Wade at the last chamber breakfast make a wonderful presentation that for some reason, for all the presentations I've heard and classes I've sat in on, it was a wonderful presentation about how peaches travel. And I don't know why it hit home, John, but it did. So I welcome you not only to a conversation about food, but I appreciate so much the work that we do together as a community here for the people that live here, for a respect for the land that we live on, for a real respect for the way in which, and I have to say it is true, that it's unique in the state, it's unique, maybe larger than the state. And I know Chris is here and he gets that. I've heard him speak about this as well, that the sense of community that exists here and respect for each other and respect for the things that we bring to the table is real. So I appreciate that this conversation is about food. That's good. As you can see, I enjoy that. But it is also about something I think much more significant and so timely. So welcome to all of that. I'm glad you are using our space at this college. We feel so privileged and fortunate that we can finally have a building that matches the excellence that our faculty and staff have been providing for all 48 years now, 49 years of the college. That this building really is a statement to our students and to all of you in this community that this college is here for the duration and is at a first-class level. So I want to welcome you to your college, to your space. Please go up to the library, walk around the library. In the library Facebook, one last quick story. In the library Facebook, a student wrote that it was like a magical treehouse. I think when you go upstairs, you'll understand why she said that. So welcome and have a good conference.
Hi, I'm Sam Stegman. I'm the coordinator of PV Grows. I am going to talk a little bit, but the point of being here is for you all to talk to each other, so I'm not going to talk more than 10 minutes. Today is a structured experience to help you find out what each other is doing and help you get more perspective on each exciting thing that you are doing. So it's less of a conference and more of a sharing experience. So I'll explain a little more about how that works. I guess first I just want to say PV Grows is a network. It's not an organization, and it's relatively new. We're a few years old, and we're growing fast. And I have only been working in farm and food issues for a year and a half. I've been coordinating networks for 10 years before that. And so as far as a network to be a part of, this is the most exciting one I've ever been a part of. And I said, I mean it. Just because the dedication that people have, the passion that people have, if you need evidence, no one's really making a lot of money, and no one's like living a life of ease and luxury, or of a lot of free time. There's just this passion and excitement that is obviously it's rare in the current economy. So that's why I'm just really pleased to be here. This is the overview. PV Grows. The keyword here is network. The network is us. We are it. It's not a network of organizations. We are a network of individuals. Having a network is different from networking, like schmoozing. Having a network is about deepening your relationships with the people you know and expanding to know a broader network. And it's clear that food systems with robust networks are more resilient, have more momentum, more innovation. And then learning, we don't do a lot of that, but we do some here at these sessions, which are twice a year, meaning we don't do research, we don't do reports, we don't do programs, we just do this twice a year. Action. So people have started projects as part of PV Grows, and you can do that, but you don't have to. And you'll hear today about some of the ones that have started. Really, really impressive stuff. So what does that mean for you? We thought we'd lay out like our goals for you today. 3 new connections. So it could be with someone you already know, going deeper, or it could be new people that you've always wanted to meet. And I just want to say, blue sheet that you got is the only handout, because when I go to a conference, the only thing I care about is the agenda and the list of who's there. And I might be overly nerdy about this, but I usually write, like I'll put checks next to all the people that I hope to talk to that day, because it's usually my one chance. And then the second one, your role in entrepreneurship is kind of the learning thing. It's like, well, I might not be an entrepreneur, in fact, I'm not, of the sort we're talking about today, but I have a role in promoting it. And so what's getting perspective on that is the learning goal, and then what's next for me? What action am I going to take next? So you'll just see. Tell me afterwards if these were realistic goals or useful goals, and if you move forward on them. When we say food system, I show this at each one of these. This is a very brief, concise, I think excellent description of a healthy food system. So there's a lot there, right? So PV Grows addresses these sort of as we go around. Of course, these all intersect. So that's just like the context. And so we chose this word entrepreneurship, which I personally found really jargony at first. I mean, it's just a term, and it is jargony, right? And it gets thrown around. What does it mean? We're just, PV Grows and everybody else, well, PV Grows, I should say, trying to figure out, like, well, if we're going to promote entrepreneurship in the food system, farming and non-farming, what do we mean? Who are we talking about? So I have no idea. I just made this up, so you tell me if this seems reasonable. So like your stereotypical entrepreneur, Gordon Gekko, Steve Jobs type character, right? Or what, like what are the characteristics of that type of entrepreneurship? Determined? Throw them out. You got to. Ambitious, bold, innovative.
Tireless.
Vision.
Risk taker.
Right. Risk taker, right? So that's a common definition of entrepreneurship, is seeing opportunity, taking risk, often financial risk, to make profit. I think in the middle of the spectrum we have what I call profit plus. So it's like other forms of profit, social benefits, ecological benefits, not just the financial bottom line. And from in between these two, you've got these gradations, right? And this is part of the spectrum. Whereas over here, social profit, you hear about social entrepreneurship, and I was trying to figure out what this means, but I think it means like what I do. I work in a nonprofit, I work on food issues, but I don't exchange any food for money, right? I'm not engaged in that activity. So that makes me a social entrepreneur, but that's not what we're talking about today. That's not what we're highlighting. We're talking about people who are doing some kind of financial exchange at some point in the sort of food value chain. Does that make sense? All right. Now, if you now suddenly think, oh, well, I'm over here, so do I belong here today? And I'll just say, just for the record, I work over here. I have never worked over there. I've never worked a significant amount of time in a food business or a farm or even a non-food business. But, so I'm just putting that out there to help you feel rest assured. The red, this is my analysis of who's here today. Raise your hand if you think you're in the red, primarily. Get them up there, yeah, okay. And then entrepreneurs up here today, about half of those are farmers. And again, I've got farmers who are doing businesses and multiple things. And then higher education, which is great. We haven't had as much of that in the past. Yeah, go back. Entrepreneurs and farmers, raise your hands. Yeah, all right. And then higher education, raise your hands. Right. About half of those are students. And then last is finance. Raise your hand, finance people. So that's a strong, obviously supporting element for entrepreneurship, and it's a strong part of what PV Grows does. Okay, this is the end. This is the end. It came to me in a dream. Well, it's like if the food system is a large, large ship that moves very slowly. If it's going to change course, it takes a long time. My sense is that no one is steering it. We are all doing that together. But the entrepreneurs are in the engine room. Like, that exchange is, we can't go anywhere without it. And so that's why today we're kind of giving the microphone to them. So how we're going to do this is, we're going to spend 30, actually a little more than that, minutes doing some relationship building. We're going to get up and move around, get to know each other. Then we're going to break up, and you're going to hear from the 5 presenting entrepreneurs. And then we come back together right before lunch to kind of debrief that and talk about what's next. And then lunch is working group. So working groups, some exist, or you could start a new one. And then after lunch, we have an exciting session that's sort of offshoot working group type thing, which Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is running here, 1 to 3. I'm going to pass it off now to my colleague and friend, John Engel. John is with, he has a consulting business called Life Migrations, which works both with individuals and organizations in transition, which has been tremendous for PV Grows. He's basically, we designed this today together. And he'll do this, and he'll come back a little bit later, too. So, thank you.
Thanks, Sam. It's a lot of information to take in about the day. I want to encourage you just to look around the room and see who's in the room. If you haven't done that in a few minutes, just to appreciate the number of people and the people themselves who have come here today with some passion around farm and food entrepreneurialism, or just simply farm and food promotion of local farm and food here in Pioneer Valley. So hopefully a couple times during the morning, since Sam said it's going to be a little fast-paced and getting up and moving around, which we're going to start with in just a couple minutes, you'll have a chance to just also check in with what is it about this morning you're appreciating, and being able to take that with as you leave today and go back to the multiple roles that you have, and taking the good work that's happening here this morning to those places as well. What we're going to do for the next 30-plus minutes is really an activity around relationship building. The feedback that came from the event back in February that was held at Open Space in Holyoke was the relationship building piece of the agenda was very much appreciated, very well prized by those who were there as an opportunity to not just connect with new folks, but connect at deeper levels with folks you already know, or folks who you're in other workshops or meetings with, but things are so fast-paced that before you know it, you're running out the door 5 minutes early, and that person was 5 minutes late, and you didn't even get to talk to find out what's going on in their world of this food work. So this activity will provide an opportunity for you to do some of that, deepening those relationships and forming new relationships. What I'm going to encourage you to do, what I'm going to invite you to do in just one moment is stand up. You can leave everything at your table. You'll be right back. You won't really need materials with you during this activity. You're going to stand up and you're going to find one partner. Could be someone you know, could be someone you don't know. You're going to have a conversation with this partner for about 5 minutes, and I'll prompt you with a question that you can use for that conversation. After that 5-minute conversation, the two of you are going to find another pair of people that have just been having a conversation, and you will start a second conversation. I will offer a second question or prompt for that second conversation. And after that second conversation, there'll be a transition where the four of you find four others, and you're going to have a third conversation. Again, I'll offer a question that will prompt that conversation. So it's 3 conversations, expanding circles. You start with 2, you go to 4, you go to 8. And then we'll hear back just very briefly, popcorn style, some of what was happening in those conversations. And we'll use this to just kind of build the energy in the room within yourself, but also between the people that are in the room to go into the next part of the agenda. I know it's going to work. That laugh tells me that you know it's going to work as well. So, how about you go ahead and stand up and find your partner? Again, you can feel free to leave things at the table. Just a very quick, you get to move, find little pockets in the room where you can stand with a partner. You can move up front, you can move to the back, you can be between the tables. The first question, the first conversation rather, starts by having you locate yourself on this continuum that Sam introduced. Just simply locate yourself on that continuum with yourself and then with your partner, and use this question as a starter for conversation. What entrepreneurial characteristics and practices do you bring to the Pioneer Valley food system? So locate yourself on that continuum, and what entrepreneurial characteristics and practices do you bring to the Pioneer Valley food system? Boy, the energy got moving in here quickly, didn't it? Lots to talk about around this question. Take the energy from that question, from the conversation with your partner, find another set of partners, and use this question to take the conversation to the next level. What could a thriving culture of farm and food entrepreneurship look like in the Pioneer Valley? It's not to say that the current culture isn't thriving, but taking it beyond that. What could a thriving culture of farm and food entrepreneurialism look like in the Pioneer Valley? Find that other pair of folks, and with 4 of you, have some conversation using this question as a starter. Welcome back to our next transition. Lots of conversations still going, which is a great sign. Let's take the energy from that second conversation and now move to an even wider circle. You're going to find another set of 4 conversation partners, which of course means there will be a lot more listening happening in the next round, right? You've got 7 other conversation partners. The question that we have for this third conversation, building on the first 2, is what conditions would expand farm and food entrepreneurship in the Pioneer Valley? So what specific conditions and resources would expand farm and food entrepreneurism in the Valley? So these obviously are conversation starters that can inform what happens in the rest of the morning. And I'm curious if you're feeling right now, after these conversations, more connected to the people in the room. Yeah, and I heard somebody just say from a group over here, a farmer saying, I need to get off the farm and meet real people more often. And I suppose there's plenty of people in the room that need to get out of the office or out of the workshop and go out to the farm more often. But what we're trying to do here with this particular relationship building session is have conversations to start to build deeper relationships, expand our circles of relationships, so that the work that needs to be done when you leave here today has more of a foundation to work from, a social foundation, a social fabric. So thanks for engaging in those conversations, those starters, and we're going to transition to Margaret Christie from CISA. So you can migrate back to your seats
thank your conversation partners.
So I'm sorry, I know talking to each other is really part of the fun here, but I'm the one who has to get us back to sitting down and looking up here. I apologize for that. I'm Margaret Christie. I work at CISA. I'm also on the PV Grows Steering Committee and the Infrastructure Finance Working Group, which runs the PV Grows Loan Fund. And we, all of us together, have just imagined a culture of thriving food and farm businesses that provide living wages and sustainable working and life conditions, and that go a lot further to feeding all of us here in the Valley and people beyond than we're able to do now. And I know in my group at the end, I think it began to feel like, ooh, it's a long way to get there. So part of what I want to do is remind us that we have a really strong base that we're building on. There's a lot of assets in our current local food system. So I just want to help you see some of them. We have really, really excellent agricultural soils here in the Pioneer Valley. We have experienced farmers who are growing a wide variety of different crops and selling them through different market channels. We have new young farmers, a steady, if small, influx of new farmers, and they're people who are figuring out ways to get really good training from other farmers and from training programs, so they come into operating their own farm businesses with really good skills. And they're selling a whole lot of different things. They're selling fruit, they're selling meat, they're producing dairy products, they're producing value-added things like wines and jams and relishes and yogurt, honeys and maple syrup sweeteners, flowers for the florist trade, which there's not a lot of that locally anymore, and some exciting new products like grains and dry beans and malted barley for making beer. They're selling those things through lots of different channels, direct market outlets like farmers markets, and also wholesale channels, and through those wholesale channels, the products are getting to restaurants, they're getting to dining services, they're getting to hospitals, they're getting into preschools, and some of this we're going to hear more about as the day goes on. And they're going to processors who are making good food like pickles, freezing broccoli for local schools, which is happening at the CDC. And we have retailers that are doing a really great job of buying and promoting locally grown products. So lots of things to feel very good about. And most importantly, there's a community here in the Valley of people who are really excited about local food and farms and are turning out for events like this winter farmers market to show their support. So that's a wonderful thing. Most of that growth has happened in direct market outlets. So farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, pick your own, really exciting ways to get your food and find out more about how it's grown and who grew it and what that's like and what you can do with it. It's really wonderful stuff. At the same time, most of us don't get most of our food directly from the farmers who grew it. Most of us in the United States and here in the Pioneer Valley get most of their food from supermarkets, from restaurants, and increasingly from big box stores. So we have two things that we need to do here. On the one hand, we need to make those direct market outlets work better for all of the people in our region. And we need to make sure that there's healthy, locally grown food at all the places that people now buy their food, all the places that we shop and we live and we eat and we work. So those are kind of the challenges that are in front of us. And the kinds of businesses that we're talking about today are really one of the keys to making that happen. So it's great that we're all here and we're doing that. CISA has just written a report. There's copies of it at the back of the room. It's called Scaling Up Local Food, Investing in Farm and Food System Infrastructure in the Pioneer Valley. And it's really about this question, how do we build infrastructure businesses that work for the local food system? And there's a lot of specific examples in there looking at kind of tricky questions like farmers tell us that there's not enough places to slaughter and process meat and bring it to local markets. At the same time, our existing slaughterhouses, and we do have some, tell us that after a very busy fall, their traffic drops way off, and it's really hard for them to make ends meet. So is there room in the middle for starting some businesses that could work for both people in that equation? I think that is, but those are the kinds of questions that we need to struggle with. And the other thing that's this report talks about is what's the role for all of us? What kinds of things can we all do to help these businesses start and thrive? And we use the word invest on the cover, and a lot of times we think that that has to do with money, but there's a lot of things that we can all do that aren't about money. But that said, the money piece is very important, and that's sort of what I want to close with here, is to think about that piece. Because this day today is focused on entrepreneurship, but we're not having a lot of time talking about financing. So I want you to know about the resources in the room if you're interested in how to finance these kinds of businesses. So there's a lot of people here that are already doing that. They're already providing funding for food and farm businesses. So I want to ask all those people to stand up so you just see faces. And we are going to ask those folks if they're willing to cluster at lunch. So if you want to talk to one of these people that's involved in food and farm financing, bring your lunch over there. The idea of clustering at lunch is not so other people can't join them. The idea is so you have a way to find them. So look for the people on your participant list, look for the faces you just saw, or bring your lunch over there and ask questions. Because these people are thinking not only about what can we do right now, but how do we build some new creative models for financing the kinds of businesses that we want to see. And I want to mention a couple examples of that. There's a couple people here from the Sisters of St. Joseph in Springfield. Their ministry is really focused on social justice and the environment, and they wanted to align some of their investments with that mission and the work that they do in their ministry. And so they made an investment in the Pioneer Valley Grows Loan Fund, which is focused on supporting infrastructure for our local food system. So that's a very exciting example. We hope more people will do that kind of thing. I also want to welcome the folks who are here from Slow Money Maine. They've catalyzed about $1.6 million of investments in the agricultural sector in Maine. And they've done it through a lot of different channels, including a micro-loan fund with the great name No Small Potatoes Fund. So there's a lot of other people who are thinking about how do we do this in new ways. The Pioneer Valley Grows Loan Fund is going to spend the next year doing research on how to start a community capital loan pool, which would be a way for those of us who have some money in the bank but are not large investors. We're not in the habit of giving loans to businesses, but we would like to put some of the money that we have in the bank towards the businesses that we want to have in our community. So that research process, I think, is going to be great, and we hope that in a year we'll be able to begin rolling that out. And if you want to know more about that, there's lots of people here from that group, and so come find me if you need to find them, or look for them at lunch. I'm going to turn this over to John Waite. John is the executive director of the Franklin County CDC. They talk to small businesses every day, and particularly to food businesses because of their shared use kitchen, which they've been operating since 2001, and they have a really exciting new project related to freezing produce for schools. So,
So thank you, Margaret. And as Margaret said, and what we've talked about in our small groups is we have a lot of great stuff going on here in the Pioneer Valley already. But we also have a lot to do. And that's where often it's entrepreneurs who are ones that do things, that really actually get things done. Sam talked about action. So I just I'm going to take a few minutes now to talk a little more about entrepreneurs. I've been working with entrepreneurs for about 25 years and small business people. So I just want to share some of my observations. Some of them are what we already discussed this morning. And then I'm going to try to highlight the unique aspects of food and farm entrepreneurship. So this is sort of a general list of terms that you think about, traits of an entrepreneur. And the ones I want to kind of highlight there are the passion, and especially with food. I mean, people can get passionate about food, so I think we have an advantage there, because that's something we're trying to sort of sell. Smart. Smart really means knowledgeable about your product, your industry, your competition. I mean, that's just key to have that kind of knowledge, and if we share, I think more of us have that. Enthusiastic. Again, that kind of goes along with the passionate. We can get really enthusiastic about food, and then you can share that with others, and your customers can get enthusiastic. And some of the best entrepreneurs I know, like they love their product or their business, and it shows, and people pick up on that. Then there's some that are less, sort of less obvious traits. Pragmatic, practical. The first list I had a risk taker, and we all said risk taker, but a lot of entrepreneurs are actually risk adverse, and that's why they actually last longer. But they take calculated risks. I think they look at opportunities and they really think about it. That's part of planning. You have to plan to know which risks to take. Being a good listener also involves asking the right questions. Ask the strategic questions so that you get the answers, and then listen and take in what you hear and do something with it. Fair, develop a solid reputation. That's important, and especially for the long haul. You better be fair and honest, at the beginning, and you'll last a lot longer. And then one of the reasons a lot of businesses don't continue is managing their finances. So that's huge. We can talk with the finance people more about that. And I wanted to sort of echo what Sam said. We're all entrepreneurs in some way, whether you work for a for-profit or a non-profit, you work for yourself. We all have some entrepreneurial spirit. And today, I hope what we all think about is maybe, should we be more entrepreneurial? Should we take on some of these projects? Or do we support others? We have a lot to do, and so we might have to push some other people forward. But taking some of this information that we're talking about today might help us do that. And I have to talk about the peaches since Bob talked about it. Why do we need to do things differently? I think we're all aware, that's why we're here, but this is a great example. These peaches traveled 9,000 miles to get to the grocery store here in Greenfield. They're a product of China. They went to California to be packaged. Obviously, some preservatives in there, who knows what else, plastic container, and then they were shipped from California to here, we bought them. Now, when we look out the window in the Pioneer Valley, we can see peaches. So the system obviously isn't working. And then my other little comparison is, your marinara sauces. We don't mention the names, but this is some very large corporation who owns this now. And if you look at the list of ingredients, a lot of preservatives and things in there. And then you look at this. This is the Pioneer Valley marinara sauce that we made last year. And it has 96% of the ingredients are within 20 miles of Greenfield. And we did it at and what's great is we did this at a fairly affordable price. We don't have to. We make a lot of specialty food products at the food center, but we can do these things at a reasonable price and compete with some of these other products. So just quickly moving on to some of the other things that successful entrepreneurs, things that, especially the ones around here, this is what I've seen them do. They have access to resources. It's not necessarily their resources. They find the resources. It takes work, but you got to find the money. You got to find the equipment. You got to find the people that you need. And then juggling that equity versus debt issue. How much of the resources do you have to have versus borrow or work with others, maybe in partnership or something. Technology, both for your operations as well as marketing. Social networking is really important. You got to stay up on the latest technology. Planning. I always go back to planning. You have to plan for success. Luck is great, but planning is much more dependable, and hope for a little luck along the way. Networking, we talked about networking up and down the supply chain. We have some people that have done some joint purchasing or joint marketing, keep their costs down, so networks are important. And then this add value is key. Know where you are. We talked about the value chain. Know where you are in that, and what value do you add? And if you add some real value, people are going to respond to that. They're going to want to support you. And then this one about know when to bail. You have to know when to quit. You got to make mistakes. We've had 225 people have used our kitchen here in Greenfield over the last 10 years, and a lot of them stopped. They didn't continue their business. And they did that before they lost too much, before they invested too much. So sometimes you have to know when to say it's over. Know your customer. It's all about the customer. If you don't have customers, you're not going to have a business, of course. And if you don't do the selling, no one else is. So you have to be, the entrepreneurs that I know, they're just selling all the time. And then the whole thing about the community. Your business, most good businesses have an impact on the community. There's an exchange going on there, both ways. So if you're involved in the community, your business is going to last longer, have a better reputation. Hope you recognize all these pictures. Okay, I'm not explaining them, but just pictures are good. And this one is seek help, and help is available. I mean, a lot of us in this room support entrepreneurs. There's all kinds of resources out there, but you have to ask for it. And we talk about entrepreneurs being independent. And there is some truth to that, but a lot of the successful entrepreneurs, they ask for help. They reach out and they get it, whether it's through partnerships, they build a team, they get advisors. Some of the great businesses I know, they actually set up formal advisory teams, which they can go to, and it's not family and friends who just tell them yes all the time. It's people who ask the hard questions and hold them accountable. So setting up advisory teams, having goals, and then the realistic expectations. A lot of the businesses, it's because some businesses actually make a little money, but they still go out of business because they didn't expect the hard work, they didn't expect the impact on their family, on their social life. So you really have to have expectations going into this, and if you're not the right type of person, then maybe you should support entrepreneurs. So you can go both ways. But entrepreneurship really is a way of life, and it's a great way of life for some people, and not so great for others. So there's some adding value, the frozen broccoli there. And then at the end, lastly, I just want to talk about the vision. You have to have vision at the beginning. You have to hold on to it, drive towards it, and share it. And if you have the vision and you share it, other people are gonna see that, and they're gonna become part of your vision. And then, lastly, you got to enjoy what you do. And hopefully, we all do what we enjoy, and that's going to make it much more sustainable. And I think working with food and farming, it's a pretty enjoyable life, hopefully. So hopefully, we'll develop more entrepreneurs who enjoy what they do here in the farm and the food and farm community in the Pioneer Valley. So that's my overview of entrepreneurship. So I think I'm going right to Tim. Tim Wilcox from the Kitchen Garden, and he's going to share some of his experience as a food and farm entrepreneur here in the Valley.
So as the token farm and food entrepreneur on the PV Grows Steering Committee, Sam asked me to talk a little bit about my story. And what I'm going to do is sort of talk about our business and try to get right to the meat of the things that we find most important, most interesting to talk about, and that's sort of what we're asking our entrepreneur presenters to do too. So, when we started our farm, I didn't really know anything about being an entrepreneur. I was incredibly motivated and had a distinct vision of what I wanted our farm to be, a very small farm producing unique and high-quality vegetables. But we didn't have any land. So I rode my bike around Hadley, found an abandoned field, went to the town hall. We looked up the owner, sent them a letter, ended up working out a barter arrangement for use of the land. But we didn't have any equipment, so I called up my former boss, Leslie Cox from the Hampshire College Farm, and he drove his tractor about 10 miles down and plowed our field for us. Quickly realized that a big part of being an entrepreneur is knowing your limitations and asking for help. Our second year, we wanted to expand, and we were able to access an additional acre across the street. It was a 50-foot wide strip of a very, very long field that was one of Joe Sikowski's organic buffers. If you're certified organic, you have to have 50 feet between you and the next conventional farm. Since we're not certified, it was a perfect fit for us. We had a great year that year. Our farm was successful. We had acquired a lot of dedicated customers, both at the farmers markets that we went to and some of the chefs from the best restaurants in the valley. But while profitable, it still wasn't really making us a living. We were too small a scale. And we were expecting our first baby and started to realize that, we needed to scale it up. So we looked around for farmland to buy, which is an incredibly difficult task if anyone's tried it. But we got lucky, found 7 acres, and with the help of the APR program, we were able to purchase it. And we sold the development rights to the state, and we used the cash that we had received to invest in our new farm. We bought a couple of used greenhouses, renovated the barn into a usable packing room, and put in an irrigation system. But we didn't know anything about how to put in an irrigation system. So we got a grant and technical assistance from the USDA to dig a shallow well and put in a low-impact micro-irrigation system using drip and sprinklers. More recently, we got other grants from both state and federal agencies and a low-interest loan from Farm Credit to build a larger greenhouse for winter production, which is full of amazing baby plants right now, which I'm very excited about. New winter farmers markets have sprouted up all over the valley in the past 2 years, and we're seizing the opportunity to meet some of the growing demand for winter greens. We've been really successful growing and selling our vegetables and creating a brand as food-loving farmers. But, to be honest, we really haven't mastered the economics of farming yet, or figured out how to make farming a lifestyle that we can live with. How do we continue to grow our business without creating more work for ourselves or becoming saddled with unrealistic amounts of debt? As farmers, how do we make enough money to pay for the cost of having 2 kids and still have time to spend with them? And what do we do when we're hit with weather like we've had this fall that wipes out a substantial portion of what we were expecting to make? So it's when things get tough and we hit roadblocks that our entrepreneurial spirit really kicks in. It's become very clear to us that to have all of our income tied to crops growing in the field is unwise. And so, we're investing in indoor production, and we're starting to have other ideas for our business as well. We're exploring what we could possibly do with prepared foods. But before, sorry, I got off a little bit. Prepared foods. We're food people at heart. This is why we farm. We're really, we love cooking, and our talents in the kitchen, are also an undeveloped resource, that we could potentially use in our business now that we need to drum up some more cash. So this is a snapshot about, right now where we are with our business and what our thinking is. But before we take out a new loan to build a farm kitchen, we're going to use our network and borrow some space from somebody else, or maybe use the processing center. What we've learned as farmers and entrepreneurs is that we can't do it all ourselves. One of the best tools for collaboration that we found is a Google group that's for farmers that my wife Caroline started this past spring. It's allowed Valley farmers to instantly draw on a wider pool of experience than they would otherwise have when they need help or want to ask a question. And the PV Grows Network, can go much beyond that in terms of its potential for collaboration across different groups. So I encourage you to look around the room and think about the questions that you have about how to move your project forward. And the person sitting next to you may have a different perspective that can be extremely valuable. Thanks. So, do you want to take over?
Thank you, Tim and Margaret and John. So we're going back and forth. Now we're going to go into smaller groups again. You saw that list of 5 enterprises that are going to be featured here today. Unfortunately, you only get to choose one. So it's going to be you have to make a tough decision. You're going to hear from each of the 5 presenting groups about 30 seconds about, like up here, we'll give you a little overview so you can decide.
Farm to preschool and families, I want you to imagine this. Imagine little kindergartners, okay, banging on school lunch tables, demanding better food. Can you picture that? Because we are graduating preschoolers into the public school system, and they are eating fabulous food grown by our farmer Joe. A group came together about 4 years ago in Springfield, wanting to transform the preschool arena. We wanted to increase quality of food, increase the connection to local farmers, and increase capacity of staff to change the food culture. We're in our 4th year. It's a learning experience. Kelly Irwin hooked us up with Joe Sakowski. We've been thrilled to be working with him. We're trying to figure out different systems, such as delivery and ordering, etc. We've got Sarah Teese from Square One, who will be talking in our corner. And I want to acknowledge one of our funders, the Stokes Foundation, Tom Willits, who's been supporting us. And we're thrilled. Our vision is that in 2015, children, family, and staff of the preschool arena are eagerly nourished and empowered by the benefits of a strong local food system supported by a high-functioning and sustainable co-op buying model. So if you want to hear more and help us brainstorm, come to our session.
Hi, we're Amy Klippenstein and Paul Lisinski from Side Hill Farm in Ashfield. At a time when the dairy industry has been struggling, there are a lot of dairies going out, all dairies are looking for ways to make ends meet, we made the unusual decision to start a dairy in order to make a value-added product, which is our Side Hill Farm yogurt. We also sell raw milk and beef from our grass-fed herd, and we grow vegetables. So we're going to talk a little bit about our entrepreneurial approach, the sort of how and why of the way we approach our business. We're also going to talk about some of the challenges that we've run into. And we'll sort of survey the group and see how specific to dairy or how general towards food processing we are going to take things. So we hope you join us.
Hello, I'm Dan Rosenberg from Real Pickles. Based here in Greenfield, we make raw, naturally fermented pickles from locally grown organic vegetables. And we started out at the food processing center that John Waite talked about, and a couple years ago made the leap to our own facility right across the street. And we are selling to about 350 stores around the Northeast. All our vegetables are locally grown. We only sell within the Northeast. It's kind of our way of trying to promote this idea of a local and regional food system and do our part and sort of trying to be a model business if we possibly can be. And so I will talk a bit about just my experience in trying to build a small value-added food business here in the Valley, and talk in particular about some of the ramifications of our commitment to buying local and in season, and the sort of whole host of challenges that come with that, from financing and forecasting to labor and facility requirements, that kind of thing. So hope you'll join me.
Hi, I'm Daniel Martinez. I'm the chef and co-owner of Bistro Le Grand Northampton. My co-wife couldn't be here today. What we're going to do is I'm going to be talking about the path that we have taken in opening and maintaining a sustainable restaurant here in the Valley that year-round uses almost 100% locally small farm grown meats and produce. In addition, we'll be talking about the trials and tribulations that we've come across in building successful farm-to-restaurant interactions, managing our customer response, and I think most importantly, balancing our food economics with trying to run a profitable business.
Hi, I'm Shelley Beck from Enterprise Farm in Whately. We're an 80-acre organic farm with CSA, and I'll be talking about our mobile market, which is sort of the mission-driven project. Kind of unusual to have a mission-driven project in a for-profit business. Talk about what the trial year of doing that has been like this year.
Thank you. And I just want to say that the process of brainstorming all of the enterprises in the Valley that could be here today was so exciting. We're about to start, so like I say, just move to your places. All right.
I want to invite a few folks. I think it'd be nice to have 5+ folks who would like to report. And so here's a question I think would be useful for us to hear about from others. The question is, how has your understanding of farm and food entrepreneurism shifted this morning?
Eric DeLuca.
Thank you. So my name is Eric. I work with co-ops all around the country, including the food co-op several food co-ops in the area here, and also dairy producer co-ops that supply our local food system and support our local farmers. I also serve on the board of the Vermont Agriculture Innovation Center, which has driven over $3 million of funding for supporting value-added producers in the region over the last 2 years. What I learned this morning, I was spending some time with Paul and Amy from Side Hill Farm that manufacture yogurt, and what was interesting to me was that they had done a lot of thinking over a long period of time about what was important to them, what their values were, and they built a business model around that ended up looking like supplying yogurt that was really high quality at a price that a moderate income person could afford to pay for everyday consumption, and also supplying vegetables to local markets. But that those decisions, for instance, to supply in Massachusetts only, were things that came out of the upfront work that they had done about thinking about what was important to them. And so they've built a business that works for them and also creates jobs in the area that's the foundation of which is their values. And then you can see market choices and other decisions that are business decisions as outgrowths of that values-based decision.
I'm Alex Risley Schroeder, and I sit on the steering committee for PV Grows. And I want to just bring one thread from our group, which was the interconnectedness of entrepreneurs. That it wasn't just Dan from Real Pickles with an idea. It was Dan and farmers, Dan and the CDC. And that was one of the things that rose at the surface in our group.
Hi, I'm Ginevra, and I'm a student here at GCC, and I was really touched by the model that in Real Pickles business, that they leave open-ended trust relationships with the farmers and their business, and that they can not make any kind of physical monetary exchange per se at first, but they have open trust relationships that they can say, we're both here for each other and we're going to produce this together. So I thought that was really cool, and that they're completely locally based and organic, and I did not know that. So
one of the really interesting things that came out of Daniel's talk was that seemingly completely unrelated issues can impact the local food and farming economy. And we were talking about how Dan has really high food costs because he sources a lot of local food, and in looking for some other part of his business to subsidize that, he's running up against the fact that you can't sell hard liquor and alcohol in Northampton. There's a law that you wouldn't normally think would impact local food, but it does. So everybody down with the law.
So our session was around Enterprise Farm and their mobile market, and it was really exciting to hear that a for-profit business has a social mission, as many do in the Valley, and that they have been working hard and delivering the goods and working with community groups both in Somerville and in Springfield, and it was very exciting. And there was a strong sense of goodwill from everyone who listened to the story, who I think will step forward and help them continue to grow that model.
Jess Cook with the Mass Farm Energy Program. I'm actually going to draw from one of our earlier discussions from the introductory relationship building group, an idea that someone else brought up in regards to the need for higher level business technical services. It seems like we expect our food and farming entrepreneurs to be jack of all trades and have skills in every sector, be able to research every question that comes up as they build their businesses. And it seems like that we have a really mature set of food and farming businesses in our region that could use specialized advisory services that might be lacking at this point, from design build as a company is expanding to using social media to specific financing and funding questions. So I'd like to see us think about how we can put together those more specific and customizable business technical services for the different kind of maturity stages of businesses in our area.
Somebody already mentioned this, but it was true in our Farm to Preschool and Families project group too, that just the power of partnerships. I hadn't really thought about it, but they talked about the collective, cooperative purchasing that the preschools were doing, as well as the strong partnerships that Joe Zakowski has with many, many other farms in order to make it possible for the preschools to be able to purchase local food.
Thank you all for engaging in these conversations and listening to the stories of our presenters. Sam's going to take us through the next 10, 15 minutes to wrap us up.
Working groups are active in PV Grows, and other ones have been formed that are not active anymore. They sort of lived their life. So we're going to hear from two, and we're going to hear presentations just for 3 minutes from two that are currently active.
My name is Jeff Rosen. I'm with the Solidago Foundation, and we have the poorly named Infrastructure Finance Working Group. We probably need to work on that a little bit. And right now, we have a loan fund, and the basic model is that we're trying to encourage entrepreneurs at various stages of readiness to bring their very basic application to this group. And it's the Infrastructure Finance Working Group is comprised of a few lenders: Western Mass Enterprise Fund, Franklin County CDC, Cooperative Fund, New England Equity Trust, Mass Department of Agriculture Resources sits there, CISA, New England Small Farm Institute, trying to encourage business plans to come forward and percolate that meet the basic mission criteria around encouraging the local food system revitalization. And then those plans themselves that the group encourages to move forward, we will then turn over to our lending partner, Western Mass Enterprise Fund, for the due diligence, the vetting. Sometimes deals come to us and we'll turn them back to the partners. but really trying to figure out what we can do as a group to get the small food enterprises to fill some of these local food system gaps, to encourage entrepreneurs, existing entrepreneurs who want more capital, or new entries into the space. This is a loan fund, and so, you know, it goes to this question of, can some of these new entrepreneurs or existing entrepreneurs carry debt? What we're really excited to do is to move into the next phase of development and get some form of community capital fund going, which was what Margaret referenced earlier, where we really raise money from the people who've expressed their interest in supporting the local food system as consumers and have been asking for a vehicle. This is a national conversation often under the slow money tent, and we're working on it here, trying to figure out what does that vehicle look like, what can we do to get accredited investors, people of significant assets, and unaccredited investors, smaller members of the community, an opportunity to put money to work in the food system. And so we're starting the research phase of that, and we hope maybe a year from now, 18 months from now, we'll actually have a product that we can bring to people that can make a different kind of investment in businesses, more patient, less cash flow burdensome types of investments. So that's what we're working on right now.
Yes, I am Madeline Charney. I'm a research librarian at UMass. I'm also on the steering committee of PV Grows, and I'm chairing the higher ed working group. The working group was conceived at the February forum, and 9 months later, we have a lot to show for ourselves. We have over 30 people on our email list, and a lot of them are busy, but they are very interested. We have 10 people at least coming to our monthly meetings, and it's a really vibrant group. It's very exciting to work together. And everybody stand up if you're even on our email list. Can you stand up if you're in the higher ed working group? Okay, not everybody's here today, that's okay. And thank you all for your enthusiasm, those who are here. So what we're going to be doing as a group is this November 9th Fast Talk About Food. And this is going to be an array of speakers, presentations about innovative food system projects happening on campuses around the valley. And now I'm going to pass it on to Abra.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to GCC. It's a pleasure to host you all here. I am a member of the Higher Ed Working Group, and one of the exciting things that I'm doing as a member is helping to initiate a pilot year this year at GCC on food and farm studies, and it looks like we'll be moving ahead to offer a liberal arts degree option in farm and food systems next year. So I just wanted to... GCC has been very supportive of this initiative.
Other working groups that have been active that are not presenting today, one is the Farmland Working Group that is essentially working on the Forever Farmland campaign. Another is the Food Access and Community Health Working Group, some crossover with the Food Security session this afternoon. And an Entrepreneur Working Group, which would be for entrepreneurs to network with each other or do a project together. If you think you want to get involved with one is, well, working groups, what do they get? Why use this structure? Some of the PV Grows staff time, which is me, supporting, scheduling, you know, if you've never organized a committee before, I can help you learn how to do that. If you like to learn organizing skills, they're invaluable. And then you present at this forum, right? So you can recruit at these events. And then we have a network of about 400 people on our PV Grows list. And then you have a representative on the PV Grows steering committee. The last thing is, I said what you get, what you give to do a working group is you come up with your mission, what you're doing, and you elect a chair or a liaison person, and we make sure you have a representative on the steering committee, and you keep us informed. If you're a drop-in person today, if you didn't sign up ahead of time, that's great that you came. These are membership events, and so go online and become a member, please. It's free. Membership is free. We have our own website finally. We have a new logo, which we're just unveiling today, up in the top corner. That was made by Carrie Baker at Midnight Sun Designs in Northampton. We have a great steering committee. I'm going to ask them to stand up. So. And then the last thing is, if you've come to an event, to a forum, you can sign up for the listserv, and you'll get an invitation soon. So that's just people who've been to these things. That's our networking tool. That is it. All right. Thank you, everyone.